In 1975, the Church Committee exposed what had been suspected but never proven. The Central Intelligence Agency had systematically recruited journalists to spread propaganda through American media. Project Mockingbird, as it was codenamed, involved wiretaps, surveillance, and the cultivation of hundreds of media assets across print and broadcast outlets. The committee's 16-month investigation, comprising 126 meetings, 40 subcommittee hearings, and 800 witness interviews, revealed that the CIA had maintained widespread asset deployment through the early 1970s. Director William Colby admitted under oath to employing hundreds of helpers in media organizations. Director Richard Helms acknowledged these operations had existed from inception. The Family Jewels internal report, declassified decades later, confirmed the scale of media entanglement. This was not conspiracy theory, it was documented congressional record. The Church Committee's findings led to Executive Order 11905 and statutory prohibitions on CIA domestic operations, not because the allegations were unfounded, but because they were substantiated. The theoretical framework underlying Mockingbird assumed centralized control. Identify key information nodes, place assets, coordinate messaging, and shape public perception through authoritative voices. The model required compartmentalization, hierarchical command, and the limited media landscape of mid-20th century America. 3 television networks, dominant wire services, and a concentrated newspaper market. What the Church Committee could not anticipate was the platform transformation that would render this model obsolete and then reinvent it at scale. The Gulf of Tonkin incident of August 1964 demonstrates how intelligence machinery manufactures casus belli. On August 2nd, North Vietnamese patrol boats attacked the USS Maddox. This occurred. On August 4th, a second attack was reported that did not occur. Declassified NSA documents revealed the mechanism. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara pressed for confirmation of the August 4th attack to justify retaliatory strikes and congressional authorization. SIGINT intercepts were selectively filtered. 90% of relevant signals intelligence was withheld from decision makers, while reports containing severe analytic errors, unexplained translation changes, and the conjunction of 2 unrelated messages into one translation were presented as definitive proof. The NSA historian Robert Hanyok concluded in a 2001 classified study that no attack happened that night. North Vietnamese naval forces were engaged in salvage operations for boats damaged on August 6, not offensive operations against American destroyers. President Johnson privately admitted weeks later, "Hell, those damn stupid sailors were just shooting at flying fish." Yet the Gulf of Tonkin resolution passed Congress on August 7, 1964, with only 2 dissenting votes in the Senate. The fabrication enabled a decade of war. The pattern repeated in 2003 with Curveball, the codename for an Iraqi defector whose fabricated testimony about mobile biological weapons laboratories became the primary source for American assessments of Iraqi WMD programs. The intelligence community's investigation revealed systematic failures. Defense human collectors abdicated their responsibility to vet a critical source. CIA analysts placed undue emphasis on the source's reporting because the tales he told were consistent with what they already believed. And intelligence community leaders failed to inform policymakers of Curveball's documented flaws before Secretary Powell's February 5, 2003 UN presentation. Curveball was not merely unreliable, he was demonstrably fraudulent. Travel records confirmed he was not in Iraq during periods he claimed to have worked on biological weapons programs. Family members confirmed he had been fired from his government position in 1995, the year he claimed secret mobile programs began. Yet his testimony appeared in the October 2002 National Intelligence Estimate and Powell's speech, despite internal CIA doubts about his credibility. The machinery had evolved. Mockingbird's centralized asset placement had given way to distributed source manipulation. Less control over journalists, more control over the information they received. The narrative was manufactured not by placing reporters on payroll, but by controlling what sources reached them. By the 2010s, the locus of narrative control had shifted again, from human editors and intelligence handlers to algorithmic recommendation systems. The mechanism was no longer covert placement, but overt architecture, engagement-optimized ranking that systematically amplified emotionally intense content. Research published in Science in November 2025 provided causal proof of what observational studies had long suggested. Researchers built a browser extension that independently re-ranked users' X feeds in real time, demonstrating that algorithmic choices directly altered political attitudes by amounts comparable to several years of polarization change in longitudinal surveys. The methodology was elegant in its simplicity, using large language models to classify content expressing anti-democratic attitudes and partisan animosity, AAPA, The study exposed 1 to 256 participants to increased or decreased APA content for 1 week during the 2024 presidential campaign. Reducing APA exposure increased warmth toward the opposing party by 2.11 degrees on a 100-point scale. Increasing exposure produced symmetrical cooling of 2.48 degrees. Critically, 74% of participants reported no awareness of the manipulation. Algorithmic effects operated below conscious perception. Parallel research revealed structural biases in platform architecture. A 6-week audit of X's For You timelines using 120 sock puppet accounts found that neutral accounts, those following no one, experienced default right-leaning bias in algorithmic recommendations. Right-leaning content accounted for 58% of politically classified posts recommended to 18-24-year-old avatars across TikTok, Instagram, and X, even when users signaled exclusive interest in left-wing politics. The mechanism was not human editorial decision, but engagement optimization. Content recommendation systems, trained on billions of user interactions, learned that outrage drives clicks, hostility generates shares, and emotional intensity predicts attention. The algorithms did not need political intent to produce political outcomes. They needed only the correlation between affective arousal and engagement metrics. This represents a fundamental transformation in narrative engineering. Mockingbird required conscious coordination, hierarchical command, and limited media channels. Algorithmic influence requires none of these. It emerges from the interaction of optimization objectives, user behavior, and content dynamics. The narrative engineers are no longer intelligence officers placing assets. They are machine learning systems optimizing for metrics that correlate with, but do not measure, democratic discourse. The Israel-Iran war of February-April 2026 demonstrated the full integration of historical manipulation techniques with algorithmic amplification. Within hours of Operation Epic Fury's initiation, the information environment was saturated with synthetic content that achieved viral distribution before fact-checking could intervene. X announced on March 3, 2026 that it would demonetize for 90 days any account sharing AI images of armed conflict without disclosure, but the intervention addressed symptoms, not mechanisms. A Pakistani hacker had already compromised 31 X accounts, converting them to Iran War Monitor variants to distribute AI-generated videos. An AI-generated video of an Iranian plane confronting a US ship garnered 7 million views and 15,000 likes before detection. The disinformation was not unilateral. The White House faced backlash for distributing videos, mixing real footage with video game clips and blockbuster movie scenes. President Trump was deceived by an AI-generated video showing the USS Abraham Lincoln on fire, requiring correction by military advisors. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was compelled to post verification videos, including one in a Jerusalem cafe holding a cappuccino to prove he had not been assassinated, after Iranian state media circulated rumors of his death. The verification challenges were structural, not incidentals. Commercial satellite imagery providers suspended Middle East coverage, forcing reliance on lower-resolution public satellites and radar data from outdated platforms. AFP fact-checkers identified AI-generated content through visual inconsistencies, spontaneous shadows, poorly rendered hand anatomy, implausible lighting, but detection lagged behind distribution. The artist Elnaz Mansouri, who created AI content explicitly labeled as artistic reflection, saw her work stripped of context and circulated as documentary evidence. AI chatbots compounded the chaos. Grok, X's integrated AI, falsely claimed AI-generated videos were authentic. Google's Gemini misidentified a mass burial photo from the Minab school attack as depicting 2023 Turkey-Syria earthquake victims. The information environment had achieved a state where synthetic content, algorithmic amplification, and automated verification failure converged to produce what researchers term epistemic chaos, not merely false information, but the collapse of shared reality. The persistence of narrative engineering across technological epochs reveals three structural constants. First, the demand for manufactured reality correlates with the stakes of political decision. The Gulf of Tonkin fabrication enabled war. Curveball's testimony enabled invasion. The 2026 information environment shapes intervention authorization and international alignment. When policy decisions require public support, narrative engineering follows. Second, the mechanism evolves toward lower detection probability. Mockingbird required human assets who could be exposed. Curveball required source manipulation that could be investigated. Algorithmic influence requires only platform architecture that optimizes for engagement. The modern form is not covert but overt. It hides in plain sight as recommendation systems, content moderation policies, and platform design choices. Algorithmic influence works because platform fragmentation produces parallel information ecosystems where contradictory realities coexist without resolution. The 2026 war demonstrated this precisely. Iranian state media, Israeli official channels, US government communications, and platform algorithms each constructed incompatible realities for segmented audiences. The narrative engineers are not conspirators in the traditional sense. They are architects of systems that produce narrative outcomes without conscious coordination. Intelligence officers selecting sources, product managers optimizing engagement metrics, content moderators enforcing platform policies. The result is not a single manufactured reality, but competing manufactured realities, each optimized for different audience segments, each reinforced by algorithmic feedback loops. The question is not whether narrative engineering continues. The question is whether democratic discourse can function when the shared factual basis for disagreement has been systematically eroded by the very systems designed to facilitate communication.